everybody. Welcome back to Where the Rubber Meets the Road. I'm Jeff Abiad. We have a great episode lined up for you today. On his way down to the C3 Garage is none other than the fantastic Pastor Andy Rogers. Andy leads all of Capital Life's family ministries in this very same space, so he may technically be our landlord? I'm not exactly sure how far this metaphor goes, but he really embraced the car imagery for the episode, and you're going to love what he has to share. So buckle your safety belt, roll down the windows, and let's get to it. Here's our episode with Pastor Andy Rogers. Pastor Andy, I want to welcome you to the C3 Garage.
Hey, how's it going?
We're going to be talking about cars, and it's funny now. This format has worked out, but I know little to nothing about cars. I feel like you'll know more than me, and we already talked. You've got some great stories I'm looking forward to hearing.
I walked in here, and the first 5 minutes we're talking about car repair.
That is right.
So you know a little bit about it because you're telling
how much they cost. Yeah.
How much to fix your car, right?
Yeah, I learned how to drive a manual transmission, which was very exciting until now I have to replace the clutch. I don't have to replace it, somebody else does, and let's talk about happier things.
Okay, I'm sorry. Apologize.
So why don't you just first give us a little intro? You're entering the garage. Who are you, and what do you do here at the church?
Well, I am Pastor Andy Rogers, and you have entered my basement. This is where I do ministry every Sunday. We have kids church down here, and of course you know that you see that big old sign there that says student ministry. They hang out in the second service at the 11 o'clock, and love it that some of you guys have shown interest about the youth and some of the things that we do here, and because we need volunteers. So the whole reason I'm here, just kidding. So I have been here for 6 years now. Can you believe
crazy,
that? Yeah. And it's been a great time. I am what is called a family pastor, so I'm over 0 to 18. And so I used to be a youth pastor. I've been a worship leader at one time, so I know all the pressure and all the fun of producing things and everything. And then COVID hit, and I became a video editor for children's ministry. I don't know how that happened, but you learned Final Cut Pro and did all this fun stuff and everything. But it's been a wild ride, but it's been one of this is probably the best part of my life, is being here. And being here with you guys, too, because this is a great opportunity to meet you guys.
It's been a reoccurring theme, too, that people tend to wear a lot of hats. I don't know if that's just ministry.
I think it's the size church we are. It has something to do with it, but there are. I think you probably, know that better than anybody here, Jeff.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. What is the car that you want to be driving? If you could pick any car to be on this trip, what's your dream car?
During COVID, a friend of mine got married, and she was moving to Montana, and this car that she had here was not going to be very Montana friendly because it's not a 4-wheel drive, it's not a truck, and they get like 6 feet of snow, and it just kind of stays there all winter long, and sometimes they get more even than that. All that to say is I have a 2004 Mazda Miata. Bought it for a song and paid cash for it, and it's like I said, 2004, so it has a lot of miles. But I put a new top on it, and it's one of my favorite things to do. I love driving out of here on a Wednesday night or whenever I'm here, and headed down 66, get on the GW Parkway, and watch the planes come overhead, and I'm kind of doing one of these numbers and trying to stay on the road, and but it's like the best 30 minutes of my life getting back to Springfield every day. So, but it's a great car. I love it, and so I get to drive one of my dream cars. So yeah.
All right. So since you already know the car intimately, what I'm going to ask you to do now is make the sound of your car's engine, since it is your car.
Well, it is a 1.8 liter 4-cylinder engine, and it does not have a big fat can on the back or anything, so it's kind of like, So it's really not exciting.
And you're just singing along.
Pretty much,
yeah. That's beautiful. Tell us about where your faith journey began. So who taught you how to drive? And
Sure.
I mean, not just your actual car, but who taught you how to do this thing?
I kind of came from this area, which is really interesting. Not a lot of people can say that. I grew up in Falls Church, Virginia. I actually was born in Virginia Hospital Center, right down the street. It was called Arlington Hospital back then. So it's just interesting that I've come full circle, and now I'm working like within a mile of that
That is
hospital.
crazy, yeah.
Yeah. And so my mom and dad moved to Falls Church, like right around the corner, probably about 15 minutes from here.
Yeah.
And so I went to Lemon Road Elementary School, if you guys know anywhere where that is. And I went to Kilmer Intermediate. Then I ended up at Marshall High School, George C. Marshall High School, which, if you guys watched Remember the Titans, that was the team that T.C. Williams beat in the state championship. So I have no idea. I was not in high school when that happened, believe it or not. I am old, but not that old. But yeah. So I grew up here. Then I went to George Marshall. I went to George Mason University, stayed in the area again. Went to Regent University, which is, you guys know, is in Virginia. So I've been in Virginia my whole life. I've tried to get out. I actually took job interviews in the West Coast. I feel more comfortable, probably dressed like a guy from San Diego than I am like an East Coaster. But yeah, this is where God has me, and it's just cool to be in this time of my life and be right back where I started from.
Yeah.
Basically, I did a full circle. So
Has your Christian faith been part of your life from the beginning?
yeah, actually, my mom and dad were believers, before I was born, and when I was 7, we were at a Sunday night meeting. You know, they had Baptist church, they had Sunday service, then you come back again for Sunday night, and you go to Wednesday night. You know, I mean, it was just like when church was in, my family was there. And so I was 7 years old, and everybody was in this service. And this guy was a guest speaker, and basically he just shared what happened on the crucifixion. And I'm like, I'm listening, and I'm not quite comprehending what he's telling me, but
Right.
I knew it was serious. I knew it involved, somebody dying, right?
Yeah.
And I just, it just became real. And then it was as if you've ever seen these TV shows or movies where everything on the periphery just kind of comes into a point. And it was like he pointed at me and said, "And he did this for you." And all of a sudden, it just like, it was a ton of bricks hit me, and I didn't go up front. Everybody else was going up front, but I went home that night, and I was playing with my Hot Wheels car, and there was just this overwhelming sense of love that this person, this Jesus, would do this for me. And I'm crying, and I never cried as a kid. And my mom came up to me, "What in the world's wrong with you? What's going on?" I said, "I've just been thinking about Jesus and how he did all this for me." And so she kind of walked me through the steps of salvation and everything. So I accepted Christ that night.
I really love that. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because your memories tend to come out very vivid. Like, do you still really remember that
I
moment?
do. I honestly can say I remember when I was 4 years old, I had a surgery, and I remember having to count backwards and having the mask go on my face and everything. So it's just, not everybody has that gift, so it's really cool. We're a club, and everything. But yeah, I do have vivid memories of my childhood.
So when we talk about your road trip now, your car is a little smaller, but we can just imagine there's an infinite amount of space.
Well, sure.
Who's on your journey with you?
You think about it, it's going to be Missy. It's a 2-seater. So we've gone from having 3 kids, and now we are what we call empty nesters now, which is super exciting. And I'll tell you some stories later about that, which is kind of fun. But basically, if you kind of look at where I'm going, what's going on, driving this car, the other piece of this pie is like making sure that Jesus is in that car. And so wherever I'm going with life, I mean, if that wasn't the case, if I didn't have that foundation, Missy and I's life would be vastly different. And I would even go far as say, I doubt we would have been together today. So God has really been with us through our journey. It hasn't been perfect, but it's been a wild ride. And we still look at each other and we pinch each other like, how do we get this? This is such a great relationship, but it took a lot of hard work to get there. So
Depending on how long you've been in the car with one person,
Yeah.
there's the known or unspoken, like who gets to control the radio
Right.
and who's given the directions and so in your relationship with one another and then factoring the Lord
Yeah,
into
yeah.
that, how does that play out in your everyday, like? What does that look like?
That's a great question. I mean, I know that Missy is the type of person who wants somebody to be the one that's going to make the decisions and even just kind of lead in the relationship. But I will say, in the last half of our marriage, she has found her voice, which is, was a little shocking at first because I was used to kind of like, oh, this is what we're going to do. And here's Roman number 1, ABC, Roman number 2, ABC. And all of a sudden she's like, well, I was thinking about this. And I'm like, who said that? And so now it's kind of fun. I've been able to take a back seat. It's even fun tonight. We were talking about driving. Missy actually drove me tonight, which I drive everywhere, but I hurt my ankle at camp this year, and I tore a ligament, which is not fun. But the interesting thing is, like, we kind of role reversal, and we found over the years in our relationship that's kind of happened. It's not like one is, I'm the leader, kind of thing. But, there's been certain kind of seasons that we've gone through where she's taken up roles that I used to do. Like, we found out that she's better at finances when it comes to the day-to-day finances than I ever was. So she ended up taking those over. I'm the guy who does the vacuuming and, the one who likes to clean and likes to make sure that the grass is cut and all of that. So we found, different seasons, different things, but it's been a great adventure, though. What's
the task in, I don't know if we're going to get into dark territory here, but what's the task in your marriage that nobody wants to do? Because we have these things in our house that, like, Amanda, will do certain things, I'll do certain things, but there are some things that I'm like, you can do it. And she's like, no, you could do that.
I would say kind of the dishwasher thing. We kind of take turns and stuff, and we used to make the kids do it, but now they're gone.
Now they're gone.
So we're still working on that. Yeah, bathrooms too. I mean, Justin was our bathroom guy, and he would just go at it, man. I don't know what made him like that or not. I mean, not like it, but when he had his choice, that was what he chose to do.
So you're looking to rent a room now, and you're looking for somebody with skills cleaning
bathrooms. Pretty much. We have 2 extra bedrooms. I mean, $400. We won't even charge you for any utilities.
Just please do the dishes.
Yeah, do the dishes and do the bathrooms. We'll be great. It'll be a great relationship.
Tell us about your playlist in your car. So what are you consuming? What are you listening to? What are you, watching in your life? Spiritual, not spiritual?
If I'm listening to something in the car or whatever, I definitely have found that Elevation is something that I'm going to put on the radio. I love... what was Lisa's favorite? Maverick City. That's another one that's a big one that I love. But I find that I've been a youth pastor since like 1989. I know, right? And just let that sink in a minute. That tells you how old I am. But yeah, I started when I was 6, and it was great. There's been one band that's kind of like morphed of every decade or whatever, and it's Switchfoot. The stuff at the beginning is a little different, but they kind of they were able to speak to the next generation and the next generation after that, and they got a brand new album out now, which is just crazy. So I've been doing that for a long time. I'm a U2 guy. I don't know if anybody was. I saw them at the Capitol Center. You have to look that up in history book to find out what that is. But then we also saw them at RFK Stadium as well and everything. So I waited in line at Tyson's Corner Mall, camped out overnight and everything to get tickets and everything. So that was quite the adventure there and everything. And then every once in a while, you'll see a Foo Fighters song kind of sneak in my playlist. I don't know. I just like that style of music and everything.
I was just having a conversation with Lucy, my daughter, because she's wearing a Nirvana shirt, which is just like in now, you know, and I'm quizzing her now. I'm like, Lucy, who's the lead singer of Nirvana? And I'm like, who's their drummer? And so speaking of Foo Fighters, we had this whole conversation. So anytime she wears an apparel that involves some sort of musician, I'll give her a little quiz.
That was cool. I saw her wearing that on Monday night. Yeah. We're pretty proud of her.
Have you passed on any of your musical taste to your kids?
I did. I mean, I used to listen to certain songs and stuff. We had like the song to get everybody pumped up for soccer games, because I was the soccer coach, and I had like 5 kids in the back, and you're driving them to the game and stuff. So we had a few songs that they liked, and we just kind of played pump up.
What was one of those?
Mostly, old Foo Fighters. That was Justin's favorite and everything. Like he says, "Oh, I want to play this," and so he'd stick it on, and we'd go, and then by the time we got there, everybody's ready to tear something apart or whatever. It was great.
Those are my proudest moments when my kids are like, "Alexa, play Coldplay." I'm like,
Yes.
"Oh,
yeah.
my child, you're my kid." When it comes to just what you're digesting, even spiritually, do you feel like there's a theme verse or maybe a book of the Bible or something that you come back to a lot?
One of the verses that has been like a life verse for me is Matthew 6:33, and it really became reality when I was 25. And so do you guys know this verse? Anyway, what are you teaching them here, Pastor Jeff?
We're on Matthew 5:16. We haven't gotten to
seek
6
first
yet.
his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things will be given unto you, okay? I've heard that verse for years before that, and I went through a dry spell. And when I say dry spell, I didn't have a date for like 2 years. A real date, I'd go on a first time date and that was it, kind of thing. And so by the time I was 25, I'm thinking marriage, I want to get married. I really want, to start my life. And, I had, met Missy, but Missy was spoken for at that time. It was just so she was like my ideal person that I thought I would want to marry and everything. But so I remember writing in my journal though, I just was like, God, if you want me to get married, great. If you don't want me to get married, that's okay too. I just remember going to camp, Messiah Camp. I was still going to Messiah Camp way back when. And all the kids were coming up to me, "What's wrong, Pastor Andy? What's wrong?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm turning 25 this year." And I always had my birthday at camp. We always went through August 1st for whatever reason. And so I remember writing this down in my journal though. It's like, okay, whatever you want from me, God. Whatever you want, I am going to seek you. I'm going to seek your righteousness. And it was as if, I'm literally putting the car into drive. That when I did that and I wrote it down, it was like something happens when we write stuff down. You always hear pastors say, "You should journal, you should do this." And I'm not a journalist. I don't do this on a regular basis. And I started doing it that summer because one of my pastors said, "Well, maybe you should just start a journal." And all that to say is like, my life went into drive. Missy showed up and then she dropped her old boyfriend and,
Good riddance.
So it was a long process, and we can take a whole nother C3 time to tell you guys about that. But yeah, so God just started prospering in little ways, just showing me, hey, if you put this to practice, I will give you the desires of your heart. And it was just like my job situation changed within 6 months of writing that down. I had been working a part-time job, much like Justin was working, for a little bit of money, here. And then God opened up a door for that, and God opened up a door for Missy and I to be together, which I never thought was going to happen. And it just like everything just kind of started sinking into place, just like the key turning, a lock and unlocking a door. And that's what it was like.
Do you find yourself coming back to that verse and recalibrating every now and again?
Always. And then, I've had a lot of seasons in my life now. And so another one for those seasons that I've been in is, obviously Jeremiah 29:11. Sometimes at the end of a season, you kind of feel lost. I don't know if you've ever been at the end of a job or maybe end of a kind of a college. I don't know about but college, like after college was over with, I was like, where'd everybody go? Everybody goes 5,000 different directions, and you're just kind of there and you're waiting for the next thing. And I just remember this verse, and this is like my go-to when I am at the end of a season, when a new season's about to start. And it's just a reminder that God wants to prosper you. Yeah. He doesn't just leave you to be on the edge of a cliff and walk away. He wants to work with you. He wants to partner with you and be that guide. When we talk about the yoke and how it is evenly yoked when he's in that other side right next to you and everything. So again, that's been a transition scripture for me. And then the final one was like, when I am at my wit's end. I don't know if anybody has any issue with anxiety or anything like that, but there's a very specific verse in Philippians 4, 6, and 7 that says, "Be anxious for nothing." And I'm like, I laugh in the face of anxiety, right? And but I still deal with it. I'm just going to be completely transparent. And I know when we use this verse, we used it with my son when he was going through a very tough time mentally and had a mental breakdown. And he had this thing plastered to his wall. And every time he started feeling that way, he would look on his wall and it would change his situation. And I am here to tell you that when you have the scripture in your brain, when you have it that you can quote, that you can write it down, and so that it stays with you, that your life changes. This is it happened at least 3 or 4 major times in my lifetime, and it's just awesome to see that. So whenever the vehicle starts to slip a little bit, one of those 3 scriptures pops up, right? And even when the wheels kind of feel, have you ever been on a road where no contact and you're putting your wheel one to the left or the right and it's still going straight? We've had this when I was driving underneath a bridge, and the bridge, it was all ice.
My goodness.
And the car actually went 180 degrees, and then it went 180 degrees, and I was going straight afterwards. Crazy. But so that is an out of control feeling. But when we have those out of control feelings, that God will come and meet you right where you're at, and his scripture says so.
I just found more and more lately too that it's so important to be intentional about what you are listening to, like in the same way that you're coming close to the address that you're looking for, and it's like I'll turn down the volume, or I'm like silence the other things and then really key into that. And if you have those like landmark verses, you can always come back and say, okay,
absolutely,
just a reminder, once things get a little bit crazy or anxious or whatever, to remember that. So you're on this trip, like you said, you've experienced seasons, personal history, you've gone kind of around, come back again, but how do you know which way to go?
Well, the biggest thing that I could say is to pray, pray, pray.
Yeah.
And that is, something that we have made a part of our lives, and hopefully we've passed that on to our kids, and I think we have. If anybody's ever heard Justin pray, it's like a sermon. I don't know. And I don't have that gift, but I'm like, where did that come from? Thank you, Jesus. But I will say that if you want to talk about a navigation system, I love Waze. And I'll tell you why. Because it's not something that sends me down the residential neighborhood, which it does, and everything. It's not that it takes me down an exit ramp to get around an accident, which it does, which is pretty cool. But what Waze does and why it's so great is because it's not me and Waze. It's me and Waze and 180,000 other people that are on the road. And those 180,000 people are pressing buttons when they see something happen. They're telling me when there's a popo, that's hiding underneath a bridge or whatever, and and I know to slow down. But that is what it's the best thing. It's like the church, that we're not doing this alone.
Yeah.
That I'm not driving in my car alone when I have 180 Wazers sitting in front of me telling me what's going on. So it is, yes, God directing my path. I will say that. But I will also say that, it is just so awesome to have key people in your life that are walking through the stuff with you.
Right.
And so when they say the most adjusted people in the world are somebody that has somebody over you that's a mentor, right? That's been there, done that. Then you have your peers, right? That are about this level. And I don't know if that shows up on the podcast, but anyway. But anyways, and then you have people that are behind you. So if you can imagine yourself on a like a rock face or something, you got the people, and he's pointing the handholds to you, right? And then there's people that are here, and you're kind of like, hey, watch this. Here's one there. There's another one over there. And then you got people behind you that you are discipling, that you are talking about who Jesus is. And I see that in C3, which is such a beautiful thing to watch. It's so cool that you are here today, because I think of your best friend that you went to Virginia Tech with, and who, basically is married now and is like living a God first life with his wife now, which is so awesome and everything. But if it wasn't for this guy, I don't know if this guy would ever known Jesus, because he shared Jesus with him. And so there's a constant thing. So if you ever think of ways, that's what I think of. I think of how it is like the church, and that I'm not alone, that I have a bunch of other people. Now, I will say I use the map version. Missy and I were just arguing about this. She does the turn by turn. And so it drives me nuts. It's like, how can you see? It's like, oh, I'm just watching. You do this way, do this way, do this way. And then you have 4 lanes that are going this way, and everything. And I'm like, I just want to see. I'm a visual person, visual learner too. And so I need to see the big picture of what's going on and something far in front of me. So that's just, I don't know. That was just one of the questions.
It's too bad we're a nonprofit organization, because this podcast could be brought to you by Waze.
It could. Oh my gosh. No doubt about that.
I did want to ask a follow-up question, which is,
sure.
how are you being intentional about making sure that you have those relationships there, that kind of mentor relationship that you're reaching for, those side relationships and the ones that you are developing?
I think being in the church is how you're going to find those people. I mean, if I wasn't in the church, obviously, I'm a pastor, so, I got people all around. Well, that's not true. Sometimes the pastors are the loneliest ones in the church sometimes. And I will say it's our executive team chat. That's one of them and everything. So that executive team chat has spawned times at coffee with Jeff and everything. And so if something's going on, when Justin, some of you remember when Justin went into the hospital, these guys were covering us with prayer. They were sending meals to us, and it was like a lifeline. And so we've kind of started returning the favor with different things that we're doing now, but Pastor Bill and Pastor Lisa are just so caring. And so, they think of all these little details that I don't even think about. I'm like, yeah, I need to eat now, and so I would have, pho sitting right there in front of me because they delivered it to my door, and that is I can't tell you how important those type of friendships are. And then as far as the ones that are my peers and stuff, I have 3 men that are in this church that I meet with on at least a biweekly basis or a monthly basis. And one of those is Peter. Some of you guys know Peter, who's upstairs, downstairs, making coffee. He does everything at this church,
He's the best.
And he's awesome, And so John McCatton is another one who I have found favor with. He's older than I am. That's finally someone, right? But so he just will sit down and just tell me how it is. And I'm like, but no. He said, no, you just need to do this. And I'm like, oh. And so I'm set free. And I'm like, thank you, John, and thank you, Jesus. But so John's another one. And then I have a guy named Kung Nguyen who is here. And he is another guy who is very purposeful about making phone calls to me. Just making sure that I'm okay. I'm like, everything's okay. I'm like, but that's how he is. He just takes care of me in that sense. And likewise, all these started out though with them needing something, and then all of a sudden I got back from them. Like there was something that was going on in their life that I just kind of reached out and said, hey, can I help you with this situation? And then all of a sudden I'm realizing this relationship is a 2-way relationship. And when I needed somebody, they were there to pick up the pieces for me.
We just finished reading Ecclesiastes, and as depressing as that book can sometimes be, the nugget that I really got from it was like, here's what's in front of you.
Yeah.
Do that. God's here in this moment. You're in this place. And I think oftentimes maybe our tendency is to desire something outside of this or something over there or somebody, whatever. But oftentimes there are these people that are already in our lives. And I had a similar revelation where I'm like, I felt like I needed those relationships, and I realized I could just reach out to this person, this person, this person. I was kind of prayerful about it and did that, and found that they needed the same thing,
right?
And I didn't have to go far to find it. They were already there.
That's so good. Yeah.
And then how about, you're in a position now where you've got a lot of people younger than you that you have the privilege of leading.
Yeah.
But are you intentional about maybe pulling out a couple and giving them a little extra time, or
a pastor friend of mine who's actually being groomed to be a lead pastor, and God's really has a call in his life. But he's been going through a tough time at the church that he's at right now. And so he was in my youth group. This is the weirdest thing when you get to be my age. There's all kind of scenarios that happen. So he's in his early 40s now, and he has 4 kids. And so we, I just called him on the phone just before I came here, and just to see, hey, are you okay? And so now we've entered into a relationship to kind of get through this transition that he's going through, and helping him out, because I've been in that spot before. I know what it's like to all of a sudden not have a job, and then finding out what is God's best for me in this next season of my life. Another one is, she's not here right now, but Yvette Headley is obviously, she's helping out with the youth. And so the transition with Justin and her has happened, and she's a great, great person. So we're starting that mentorship, and we're meeting once a week and just kind of hanging out and talking youth stuff. And it's really great. She's done a great job, and I love it that there's others in the wings that are kind of waiting to come in and do this. So I feel like that I had like this time when I was a youth pastor as a 20s, right? And I was like everybody's buddy. I had a skateboard, I played with them and did all this stuff. And then I got a little older and I became a father figure. And then I got a little older, youth group got bigger, and like I had 70 some kids in the youth group. And so I started pouring into the leaders. And that's where I feel like this is why I've been called to be the family pastor here, is because I have somebody that's in the nursery, that needs to be cultivated as a leader. I have toddlers over here in that room, pre-K at that room, K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, student ministry over in this room over here. And each one of those lead teachers are who I'm pouring into. And so, so I have plenty of work to do.
Yeah, no, but what I love about you is a genuine way that you live that out. And I feel like that's something that you model a lot. Even in my own life, when I needed help, you just came out my way, met me for coffee, those sorts of things where you will be deliberate about that. And I think it pays a lot of dividends. And sometimes I don't know if it always feels like you're doing that. Sometimes you're just being you in that place. But it's cool that God could use you in that way, just out of something so simple as a relationship or a phone call or a text.
And I will say that comes from having a relationship with God, though, right? Yeah. And I know Bill and Lisa talked about, like, before they do anything else, they kind of would kneel down and pray before they went about their day. And I kind of go even a little further than that. Before I even put my feet down on the floor. I don't know if you've ever, there's a movie. Where was that? Where they're holding their feet up above the floor, and at the last minute they put their feet down on the floor, and it just meant that another thing had just started, like another day had just started. And so I just feel like before you put your feet even on the floor, that I just call it out that, God, I am yours today. I'm here. I'm all ears. I want to find out where you're leading me that day. And that's when I find out about those phone calls. So I'll start my text before I even get off the bed, and just like, oh, I need to text Jeff. I need to text, Justin about something. And this is hard because my life is about to change again because Justin just left. And so Justin and I were very tight, very close, and we would have meetings every day, about stuff and everything. And now he's gone. So, but every time somebody leaves, though, God does something different, and there's something new that happens. And so we're in this new spot together as in a new season, Missy and I.
This might tie a little bit into that, but as you've lived however many years of life and experience and stuff, what do you do when the plans change? What do you do when the car breaks down and all of a sudden you realize, oh, this isn't working the way I thought it would?
Great question. Again, it comes back to that Matthew 6:33 of, am I doing what I need to do? Am I just breaking it down, making sure it's happening? And then, determining my direction, means that I have to put on my brakes sometimes. If you're going in the wrong direction, right, it doesn't make any sense to just keep putting the pedal to the metal and keep on going, because here's where you should have gone, here's where you're going, right? And by, the further you go down, the farther and farther apart from where you're supposed to be. So you really need to put on the brakes. This is what I've learned over the years. You have to slow down. And sometimes you even have to pull over to a complete stop to figure out what's going on, right? And so in major moments of life, sometimes you have to slow down to the 3.5 miles an hour. Anybody know what 3.5 miles an hour is? It's the walking speed of a human being. So I do this purposely. I heard this message this year at Orange Conference from a guy named Carlos Whitaker. If you've ever listened to his podcast, they're amazing. And so he just did his little talk, walking at 3.5 miles an hour as he's talking to us for 15 minutes. And but it just really kind of just helped me understand that I need to slow down. I need to quiet myself in order to be able to hear God. So one of the places I do that is at the beach. And you guys, some of you guys that know us, and that we met at the beach, Missy and I, whenever I've had a moment of really a big change that is happening or whatever, I will go away to a quiet part, not Ocean City. No, not Ocean City, but like the Outer Banks where it's a little quieter, and especially off season. And that's where God speaks to me. And that's where I've made major decisions there. I remember when I was contemplating asking this young lady to marry me, I remember walking on the beach. My grandmother was in the background watching me, and she was praying over me. I didn't know it at the time, but and everything. But it was just I've had major moments at the beach. So we all have a closet, for every day. But when there's something different, something's busted or something's not working the way it's supposed to, or you're contemplating a big decision, I just would highly recommend just make sure you're slowing down to that 3.5, making sure that you clear your brain. I would even say don't have this anywhere near your hand, and making sure that, social media, everything's off so that you can quiet yourself to hear. And we need those moments. Now, it doesn't need to be that all the time. But it really needs to be that you make time on a regular basis to just quiet yourself so that you can hear from God to get the next steps. And that's pretty much how I kind of handle it.
When you're driving around trying to find a place, are you the type of person that does or does not like to stop and ask for directions? Like, how long will you drive before you ask?
I am looking, if Waze isn't working, I'm on Google. If Google's not working, I'm trying, Apple Nav or whatever it's called. I don't know what navigation is, but for Apple, but yeah. No, there are certain times when none of the navigation systems work. And I do not like stopping. In fact, like even coming home from camp, I'm like, the guy's like, hey, you want to take a bathroom break? No, we're going. Straight in.
We're not stopping.
It's going. And so I'd say, everybody good? And everybody says, yeah, we're good. I'll be going. But yeah, so if I have to ask for directions, I will, though. I mean, if I'm just totally lost.
When you think back, since you have such vivid memories, I'm just curious, what is the car in your life that required just the most attention, the most work,
Oh, we already talked about this. So if you see this car right there.
Oh, is that the one?
That is a 1970 Pontiac GTO. And I had a 1970 Pontiac Tempest, which is the 6-cylinder version. This is a nice car, by the way. And it had a V8 engine. It has a beautiful carburetor, great sounding. I mean, if you did the muffler on that would have been fun to do for the podcast. But I had this little thing. It was free. Somebody gave it to us. I think we paid $1 for it because my mom needed a second car. And so then that car became my car as I got it. And so it was a manual transmission, had a column shift. So you had to pull forward and go down for first gear, push up for second, push down for third. And if you wanted to get reverse, you pulled back and pushed up. And,
a lot of math involved there.
Oh yeah, a lot. Or which way is it again? And but it also had like there's linkage that runs from where the shifter is to the transmission, and the linkage would just break. It just would stop working, and it would just get stuck. So I'd have to put the brake on, get out and hit a stoplight and hit this thing so it would go back into first gear and I could start over again. And so that was the most car that I wanted to drive off a cliff kind of car, but it was what I could afford at the time, so I was happy that I had 4 tires.
Is there a job or ministry position that you feel like is a good illustration of that in your life that was just required a lot of attention and work? I can think of, because what I say that is my first position in a church, I was like the same thing. It was like just what I could get. That was the church where I grew up, entry level. And so part of my job was to mow the lawn
Oh, yeah.
in Arizona, so there was no lawn, but there were weeds everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember lifting up the lawnmower
Yeah.
to like hack these weeds down and coming in just with stuff all over me. But it was just like, it required a lot of attention and like that I didn't necessarily want to give.
That was called an internship.
Yes, that's exactly. It was pretty much
and,
that.
And I had an internship at a place called Christian Assembly in Vienna, Virginia. And same kind of thing where you were doing anything and everything. And so I started out with working with middle schoolers primarily. And then when the internship started, I had like over 100 kids, I think, that were coming at the time. And the other youth pastor was being groomed to be an associate, and he was taking on a bunch of responsibilities. So he was like, okay, here we go. And then he would meet with me once a week, and that was it. And but during that time, I felt like I was doing everything. There wasn't a lot of volunteer help at the time. Big surprise, right? It's like a church is church, no matter what decade it is. And but one of the things that really was amazing about this was in the midst of all that, feeling like nobody's watching you, nobody cares. I mean, we had this videotape. I mean, we're talking videotape, like a videotape. It's an actual tape, and you put it in a VCR, right? One of those things. So it came, and I had like 4 or 5 volunteers, and I showed it to them. We were going to show this thing on a Saturday night, and it was like the most janky, horribly produced thing you've ever seen. They were laughing through the whole thing. And I get home that night, and God says, you need to show this video. And it was about teen suicide. Even better, right? And I was like, why do I even want to bring up this subject? It's just crazy. And but God just kept putting it on my heart to do this. And long story short, we showed this, and the parents actually came to watch with them. The parents were cutting up in the back, saying, this is awful, this is horrible, this is stupid, and what are you showing this for? And they didn't say that, but it felt like that. And then I make an altar call. Nobody shows up. Crickets. It was awful. And I thought I had really missed God and everything until I got there next Monday, and somebody put a letter in my inbox. Yeah, we actually had an inbox back then. Physical. You had it was a piece of paper. Somebody wrote on the back of a bulletin kind of thing. And it was like, you have no idea. I was getting ready to plan my suicide, and she had step by step what she was going to do. Wow. She came to youth group to say goodbye to her friends that night, and that is why I'm here today. Yeah. Because that happened. And up to that point, it was just like what you said, Jeff. I was sweating. I did have to do the lawn at the church as well. I was a school bus driver for whatever they wanted you to drive a school bus for. And because I was the only one that had a CDL license at the church at the time. And so I just did all these things. And, and you just wondered, well, okay, is this really what you had in mind when you called me to ministry? And it was absolutely what he wanted. He wanted to know that he had my attention. Yeah. And so, just be obedient to those little nudges sometimes, and everything.
Just a reminder, God's in the car too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, come on. What a guy. I love that conversation with Andy. And honestly, the best part about this entire podcast series has been getting to talk to all of these great people and seeing how genuine they really are. And our next episode is no exception. Pastor Andy will be pulling into our C3 showroom to answer your questions. So you can look out for that in your podcast feed next week. And there are a lot more great interviews to come after that, so stay tuned. You can find every one of our previous episodes and any future episodes at capitallife.org/podcast. And hey, we would love it if you would share this podcast with a friend. So follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts. And if you have any suggestions or comments, you can email us at c3@capitallife.org. If you want to find out more about our young adult group at Capital Life Church or get information about our upcoming activities, you can go to capitallife.org/C3 and you can get involved there. We'd love to have you. Until then, we'll talk to you next week on Where the Rubber Meets the Road.